I'm Brian V, and this is Why We Work, and I have the great pleasure of speaking to Mr. Clifford Fortner. Good day, fine sir.
How you doing, Brian?
I'm I'm doing well. Thanks. I mean, you and I have been trying to do this for the last little while, and I appreciate you taking the time to do so. Uh, we've known each other. You were actually, as I'm thinking of it now, one of the first American friends that we made while here in South Korea. And now I'm thinking about it, and I recall you and your family. You had two children at the time, if I recall correctly. Um, you were sitting at a market in Korea, and like
Da
we
Vinci.
just, what was it? Da Vinci. It was a Da Vinci coffee. Is that what?
Yeah, in Soman Market.
Yeah, it was in the market. We were going shopping, and you're like, "Hey," and we're like, "Hey," and you're like, "Hey," we're like, "Hey, why don't we be friends?" It wasn't like that, but it was just we hit it off
Yep.
rather from our family's perspective. We hit it off rather well,
Yep.
and then because you're in the job that you do now, and then you were off like some on a stallion, and we've never. Oh, that's not true. We did get to see you again. It's a very good story.
Yeah.
Cliff, can you tell us a little bit about you and in terms of work? So when did you get your first job and maybe where you're from and a little bit like that?
Oh yeah. So I'm originally from Oregon, and actually had my first job when I was like 11 years old. Um, I had a paper route, and the county that we lived in, I got a paper route, and then my friend got a paper route, and the it got my friend didn't want to do it anymore, so I told my parents, I was like, I'm gonna take over his paper route,
Mm-hmm.
and so we ended up taking it over, but it became so big
Yeah.
that my ended up having to help me every day. Um, so they drove in the car, and it basically ended up becoming their job too, because it was so large. I think I had the biggest paper route in the entire county in Deschutes County in Oregon, and then we would have competitions all the time to get people to start, and I would always win those competitions. And so I guess we were pretty well known in that area for the Bend Bulletin paper because of how successful ours was. But I mean, I couldn't do it on my own. I was like 11, 12 years old.
Why
So
did you decide to get the job in the first place? I mean, even at 11, you're like that's an official job and you're 11.
I don't know. I think I, I just I wanted to earn my own money, and
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to do something. And you ask my wife today, like, always doing something. I'm always busy with
Yeah.
something, or like always. She's like, why can't you ever slow down? Like, so, so it's I don't know. I've always been that way, and I think probably because my dad was that way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can't. There's never really been a time that in my dad in my lifetime, didn't have a job, and not only didn't have a job, but he always had his jobs for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So he go through a lot of jobs.
How
So
long? How long did your family help you with your paper route?
it was a couple of years, and then we ended up moving to Oklahoma from Oregon, and then
Mm-hmm.
that's the only reason we quit that. But it got old. It definitely got old
Yeah.
because Sunday mornings you had to get up early because that was when the big paper was. So then I had to deliver the paper before I went to church,
Yeah.
and yeah, it wasn't a fun job, but it taught me good work ethic.
Yeah.
And I got other jobs later on when I got to Oklahoma. Even when I was like 14, I got a worker's permit to be allowed to work at like a restaurant or something. Uh, but I don't know. I just never wanted to depend, even at that time, on my parents to. Yeah, there was stuff I wanted to be able to do on my own, not depend on my parents for everything. So
Did you work all up and through high school as well?
yeah, I did. Besides my senior year, I didn't. Um, my sophomore year of high school, it was really a distraction. Um, I didn't I didn't do very well my sophomore year because I was always so tired from working like 6 hours every night after I got out of school.
Mm-hmm.
I bagged groceries at a grocery store
Mm-hmm.
that whole year, and so it's yeah. And then my senior year, I was like, I just got to focus on finishing school, and at that time it wasn't as important. And really, I look back, I don't think that working during school was as good of an idea as I thought it was at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm. So when you're in high school and you're trying to focus on your studies, what is it you're thinking that you want to do at that point? Did you, I had a conversation with someone just the other day, and they kind of enlightened me to a different idea of saying, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? There's that. And then there's like rather asking our kids, what would you like to experience? Right? What are some things that you would like to experience, which might help you in your path? Did you have an idea of a career that you want to do even as early as high school?
yeah, I was always a car guy, and always in the mechanical things. So I mean, even from an early age, I knew, tons about classic cars, and I always built stuff. And um, I,
How old
I
were
think
you?
like
How old were you when you bought your first car?
15,
Really? What was it?
yeah,
What was your first
uh,
car?
71 Chevy C10 truck, and I bought it from my uncle, and I I had it before I even could drive
Mm-hmm.
because I had to fix it up and everything before I got my driver's license. And I but my dad was kind of a car guy,
Mm-hmm.
um, and even today, like, my dad not so much anymore as he's gotten older, but I always work on my own cars, even if they're brand new. If they're under warranty, I will. But um, I change my own oil, I do everything. Like, but it's just I think yeah. So when I was in high school, growing up, I always wanted to, the typical things. Wanted to be a firefighter, wanted to be a police
Mm-hmm.
officer, um, but as I got older, like, just loved cars, and I wanted to be a race car driver, and
What
like,
kind? What kind? Now this is going to separate they say the men from the women. What kind of race car driver?
I've always been into drag racing, so
Drag.
um,
Okay. All right.
yeah. But so even today, like, I'm just really, um, I just still, I like it so much.
Were you in high school wanting to pursue that? Did you want to take mechanics? Was there something?
I, yeah. So in high school, um, where we lived, there was a vocational school, VOTech, and so you had to. It was pretty hard to get into it, but what you did was you applied for it, um, and it was for your junior and senior year. So you had to apply for it your sophomore year, and then what you did was, the VOTech we went to was just right across the street from our high school, and you would go half the day at VOTech, and you would go half the day at your regular high school. Um, and I did automotive service technology, so, like, you were, all you did was worked on cars. You could get your ASE certification in brakes, or any of the ASE certifications.
What is ASC certification?
So all in the United States,
Yeah.
I know in the United States, it's the certification that automotive technicians are required to have to work at any dealership. It
Mm-hmm.
just shows that you're very competent.
Okay.
So it's the best certification you can get when it comes to that career field. Um, but after I graduated high school and did VOTech, I just really was like, I really don't want to do it as a job. Like, to me, it becoming a job would have been, took the fun out of it.
Mm.
Um, I worked for a few places, you know, working on cars and stuff. And I don't know, to me, as a job, at least in the lower position that I was in, it wasn't
Did you
very.
experience something at that time that made you realize that? Did you have like a co-op or something, or you saw some people, or was it just along your journey you realized you didn't want to do that particular thing for a job?
I think it was just as I did it, I was like, I just don't want to do this as a job. Um, but then later on, as I realized, I probably really just didn't want to do it as a job working for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
I was fine doing it working for myself,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, but not in your normal sense of just being, in that career field. But I want to build race cars, or, do the fun stuff in it, not just the everyday. Even though in that career field, the everyday working on random people, just normal people's cars is where the money's at, and that's how
Mm-hmm.
you stay. It was just, to me, like, I wanted to do something more than just the normal if I was ever going to do that.
When you decided not to do that as a career, did you have a backup plan, or you just said, I'll finish this out and play it out, see what happens?
So the funny thing is that I, after high school, I really wanted to join the Air Force, but I never did, and I'm not sure why I didn't. Um, so after high school, I got hired through a staffing agency that, they send you to different random jobs. And actually, I take that back. I had one job for over a year at a company that built steel buildings, that my dad worked at,
Mm-hmm.
because he lost his job for a big company that he worked for, because they ended up laying off a whole bunch of people. And he really didn't want to work at the place that he was working at. But I, I ended up working there. They never gave me a pay raise. The pay was okay, but the problem was, like, I don't know. I think I grew up in a family where it wasn't really pushed to go to college or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, it wasn't even an option to do that, because I wasn't even thinking about that. To me, it was just, oh, you go work. And then I so I worked at that steel building company, and then after that, I just really got tired of it, because I was like, like, I there's no real future in this, and I worked here over a year, never got a pay raise. Um, so then I went through work through the staffing agency, which really, I mean, I look back, probably wasn't great, because there was no stability. It was just, you would have this job for a week to
Mm-hmm.
a month, and then next thing you know, oh, well, this company doesn't want these people anymore. You're going to go work for this place. And it
Mm-hmm.
was, I don't know. I really didn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
I did that for quite a while. And, um, but then after that is when I worked for a guy that I went to church with. He owned a um, convenience store, and he um, worked for him for a while. And that's where I worked there when I met my wife, Nicole. And so, that, everything changed after that. But that was, so my job, like, places I worked, um, after high school until I met my wife, was, there wasn't a lot of stability. And I
Mm-hmm.
probably didn't have the greatest work ethic at that time either. Just because it was very, I don't know, it wasn't enjoyable what I was doing, and
Mm-hmm.
really didn't know what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So
So how was your wife? So when did you decide after that particular job, did you decide your present career now, or did you do a couple more things? And how did you work that out with your, girlfriend, fiance, now wife? How did you guys come to that decision eventually?
So when I met my wife, she was already had plans set up to go to San Diego fall of 2006,
Mm-hmm.
and we met May of '06. And so I was still working at the convenience store. And then I, when she went to San Diego, I actually helped her drive there because I was like, that's really far. I would feel comfortable if I went with you, so that, because, halfway across the country.
Uh-huh.
Anyways, we ended up
you,
going.
you made it sound like it was down the road. That's pretty far. I'll drive you.
Yeah, it was about 1,600 miles. But the thing was, we got there, and the missions and prayer school that she was going to, Pastor Howard, the one, the pastor of the church there, the one that was doing the missions and prayer school, he's like, why don't you stay here and go to school as well? And I was like, wow, I didn't even think that was an option. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I ended up doing that. So I ended up getting a job when we were in San Diego, and we were only there for about 3-4 months. But when we were there, I worked for a construction company doing foundations on houses. And, because it was, financially, um, that was how, we had money then. Nicole,
Mm-hmm.
my wife, she worked for the church. She was a secretary at the church while we were there. And she lived with 2 girls in an apartment. I lived with some guys at a house that the church owned. They were other students. But so even then, I worked there, and then I worked at a university there, doing on-campus ministry stuff while we were there, and got paid to do that. And then, anyways, we we went back to Oklahoma and Arkansas to get married, and we never went back to San Diego like we were going to.
You were
Uh,
planning on going back after you got married.
yeah, we were going to be interns at the school, and we were going to help teach other students and all of that. Because we were supposed to go to Istanbul, Turkey for a missions trip. And um, anyways, so when we didn't go back, we lived with my parents for a month in Oklahoma, and I was working through a staffing agency again for York, the company that makes air conditioners. And I worked there, and then we ended up moving to Arkansas where my wife's family lived. And there, I ended up getting a job at Walmart. Got one of the few full-time positions in their lawn and garden center, and I actually worked at Walmart until I joined the Army, and which was only about probably 5 or 6 months. So
So how did your decision come about to join the Army? This
okay,
was this
so
a from your own side of the family, her side, you guys talking together, thinking about your future? How did that come about?
it's funny because like I said before, I wanted to join the Air Force
Mm-hmm.
after high school, but I never did because I grew up about 2 miles down the street from Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma. So when we were in Oklahoma, actually, before we went to Arkansas, I ended up going to the Air Force recruiter. And so they had me take the ASVAB because I hadn't took the ASVAB, which
Which
is
is
the
what? Yeah.
test. It's a test that aptitude test to see how smart you are, how competent you are, to see what jobs you would qualify for in the military. And so I made a really high score, and they were like, "Wow, you could do any job you want in the Air
So
Force."
sorry for people who would think about joining the Army or the Air Force or the Navy. Were
Yeah.
you nervous at this time? Were you scared at this time? Like to go, okay, this is because most people knowing going to a job like this is a career. So you're kind of this is not a recruiting agency or this is not a convenience store. This is not some mission trip. This is a career. So how did you feel going to the military recruiter and taking these tests and like kind of taking a big responsibility upon yourself? Were you
Well,
nervous
I
about it?
think at that time I was probably a little nervous because this was the beginning of 2007,
Mm-hmm.
and it was during the surge in the war in Iraq, and that was when things were getting really bad, and the military really needed a lot of people, and so they probably lowered their standards. They definitely lowered their standards at that time for people that were joining. I had a lot of ex-convicts that were basic training with me and stuff. Um, but it was because they needed people. Lots of people were dying at that time. But the thing was, I mean, I was a little nervous, but I think I was more nervous just how well I'd do on the test because I had been out of high school for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, where most people were joining the military right out of high school, I was, 5 years ahead of that. Um,
But
and
you
then
did
my wife,
well. Oh yeah, and your wife, yeah.
yeah. So my wife, she was pregnant with our son Jaden at that time because we got married December of '06, and this is what January of '07 is when I was working in Oklahoma um, at York, and then probably January, February, we moved to Arkansas, where my wife's family lived, and then what was it, March or April, I went to was the Air Force recruiter there, but I couldn't get in because I had a hearing loss in my right ear and they wouldn't give me a waiver.
Mm,
And the Air Force, it's harder to get into the Air Force than the Navy. Um, it's easiest to get into the Marine Corps. Um, but it was at that time actually, I think, easier to get in the Army. But anyways, I went to the Air Force recruiter. Went to MEPS, which is where you go to do all the medical. They make sure you qualify medically, and I didn't qualify
mm-hmm.
um, because of my hearing. So then
Were you
I probably
disappointed? Were you disappointed with that? Like you were saying that you wanted out of high school to join the Air Force, and then 5 years later you have responsibility on your back. And you're like, I'm gonna go do it, and then they say, no, you're not.
oh yeah, I was very disappointed. I and the thing is, like a month later, I went to the Navy recruiter, and they wouldn't give me a waiver for my hearing either. And the funny thing is that my brother-in-law, Aaron, my wife's brother, and then her other brother, Justin, were both in the Army. And they both got recruited by the Sergeant First Class Lunk, the recruiter that recruited me.
Mm-hmm.
And my my mother-in-law did not like the guy. She thought that he lied to them because, recruiters are known for
Mm-hmm.
um,
Exaggerating the truth.
yeah, oh yeah. But he never lied to me or anything. He was a good recruiter. But when I was at Walmart all the time, I don't remember one time he came by and I was talking to him and I had told him I wanted to join the Air Force and then couldn't get in. He's like, "Hey, you should come to the office and you should he's like, I'm very sure the Army will give you a waiver for your hearing." And he did that for a little while, probably, I don't know, a month and a half, 2 months. And I talked to Nicole and I was like, you know what? I said, maybe I should just go to the Army recruiter. And so I did, and they gave me a waiver, and that was in July of '07. And then
How did
August.
how did Nicole, your wife, feel about you joining the military? You're like, okay, I think it might work. Was she
Oh, she
hesitant?
she was scared. She
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to be a military wife, but she was totally supportive of it though. And it was funny because I never wanted to join the Army. I mean, the Marine Corps, I was never an option, but the Army was
Why
definitely.
would the Marine Corps, I'm from Canada, so we don't have it the same way, but what's the reserves about the Marine Corps? Is it so tough?
tough and not, and it's not necessarily true, but the Marine Corps is known for not being the brightest.
Okay. Well, maybe I could get a job because I'm not very bright. Well,
But
but I don't
that's not,
know. From a Canadian, I hear the Marine Corps. Those guys are and girls are on the top of their game, from what I understand. But
yeah,
that
combat, they get pretty good training. But you got two sides in the Marine Corps. You got the aviation side, and you got the non-aviation side, and everybody in the non-aviation side is a grunt, and which
okay.
is what you call it, infantry. Even though they're not all infantry, they're all considered. I mean, you ask a Marine what job they have, they'll just tell you they're a Marine. They're not anything else.
Mm,
Um,
okay.
like if you ask a soldier in the army what they are, they're going to tell you their specific job. But a Marine is trained to we're a Marine. So
But
so
what?
yeah,
Okay, sorry, just because I'm ignorant. What would a Marine do? They're just to go fight? Is that what you mean?
yeah. I mean, they're all. I mean, they obviously have cooks, and
Other
they have
skills, yeah.
yeah, but like in the army, we are always trained that we're a soldier first, no matter what our job is. But aren't but but soldiers in the army don't really believe that. Like they know that we have another job,
Hmm.
and that the combat arms guys, the guys that are infantry or tankers or any of the field artillery, those guys are the ones who really normally do the fighting. We're
So
just
your guys' job, what you're referring to, they're transferable into um, civilian life, opposed to someone in the Marine who's you're trained to fight. You can't use that too many places outside and with civilians. Right?
yeah, and even the combat arms side of the army, I mean, those guys, a lot of them, um, a lot of them reclassed and go into other jobs in the army because they realize there's no real long-term future to those jobs outside of the army,
Mhm.
because only so many people can get hired by security contractors,
Yeah.
uh, or to go and to other countries and you know
Yeah,
do
and
combat.
on a bright side, though, we would have to both acknowledge that we appreciate those in the Marines and those that do the
Oh
fighting, and because otherwise, you would have people like me, and I don't know if you would want to rely on that, but surely people who fight and mainly just fight, we truly appreciate. But it just wasn't for you.
no, I just I don't know. I'm not soft. I guess I was like, I gotta stay alive for my family.
Well, I mean, there's a good point, right? These are hardcore folks that you don't want to mess with, and you're glad that they're on the front line because they're hard,
Yeah, they are,
right?
and they're
So I
they are,
don't want to
and
begrudge them or anything.
their quality of life in the army and the military is quite different than everybody else's too. They're away more.
Mm,
They're out in the field more. They get treated a lot different.
mm.
Um, yeah, it's just a lot tougher environment.
So your wife was hesitant of you joining, but so you decided to go for it.
Yep. So I wanted to do satellite communications. Actually, I wanted to be a LPN, licensed practical nurse, which is a 68-week ski Mike 6, which is a code, identification code, but they
Hmm.
changed it. That's been a long time now. They changed it now to a 68 Charlie. Um, but anyways, so I didn't qualify because of my hearing class, because I had to get a waiver. And so I wanted to do satellite communications. But actually, the funny thing is the reason I picked my job as a biomedical equipment technician was because, anybody that doesn't know, I repair medical equipment. I'm like an automotive technician for medical equipment. But the reason I picked that job is literally because when I went to the recruiter, it was one of the ones on the list, and it had the longest training.
Mm.
And like, oh, so my wife and my son can come with me, right? And they're like, yeah. I was like, I just wanted my wife and my son to be with me. So I picked the one that would actually happen. And because my training was just a little over a year, which is really long compared to most of the jobs. I mean, most jobs, the training for them in the Army is maybe a couple months. Some of them are about 6 months, but mine was, over just about a year, a little over a year.
This way, the training you chose would allow you to live in a place, be trained, and have your family with you.
Yes.
Opposed to being deployed right after you're done your training and in a short period of time.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I was, the unfortunate thing was at that time, we still had drill sergeants for not just basic training, but for our advanced individual training. That's the training you do after basic. And then they took them away for several years, and now they're brought them back. But so I was around drill sergeants for 15 months, and that's. Are
you suggesting that is difficult?
It's not easy. So,
yes, drill sergeant.
It's like, well, when you go to AIT and you go for a year, it's like kind of like you're going to college, but you're going to college with drill sergeants down your throat all the time, and they're not nice. So
they're not supposed to be nice.
No. And yeah, they make a lot of people cry, and so
your position has mainly stayed to what you're doing. So how long have you been in the military now? You're presently active.
So today is the 6th, right? So in 8 days, 13 years.
Thank you for your service.
You're welcome. So yeah,
even from Canada, you're a big brother that protects us. Everybody knows that. It's no secret. If it wasn't for America, we would be doomed.
Yeah, you guys' military is tiny.
I mean, that is if any other country want to take over Canada. I mean, if
they won't do it.
Quite cold. A lot of resources, but beautiful. So on a daily basis, what does your job consist of as a medical equipment technician?
Okay, so now, because I'm higher rank than I obviously was 13 years ago, it's quite different. So now I'm a supervisor. I'm in charge of, I'm what they call a squad leader. I'm in charge of 4 other guys in my squad. I have 2 team leaders, and then so now I mainly supervise. There's me and 2 other staff sergeants, and we're all squad leaders. And then we all have, like 5 to 8 soldiers under us. But the big thing we do now is not only do I don't work on equipment anymore. I QA QC, some like quality assurance, quality control. After the technicians do all their work on the equipment, then we have to go behind them and make sure everything is right, not in the work they did, but mainly in the paperwork, calibration stickers for the equipment that requires calibration. And then we have to go into what's called GCSS Army. That's the system that we use in the field units to keep track of work orders, and we have to account for all of our time. Anyways, so we do that, but then also I have to supervise my soldiers and other soldiers, but mainly my soldiers. We have to give them monthly counselings, performance-oriented counselings, and how they're doing, and we have to make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to for their career path, that we give them, that we find opportunities for them to get better, more training in our jobs, because the Army is not just, oh, you go to work, but like in order to get promoted, you have to get in the enlisted side of the Army, you have to get promotion points, and you have to go to different training to get points, and you have to, you have to do physical training, and depending on how you do on your physical fitness test, we call it the Army Physical Fitness Test, the APFT. You get a certain amount of promotion points for that, and then we go to the range and shoot our assigned weapon, which most of us is an M4, and you get a certain amount of promotion points for how you shoot at the range.
Is for a promotion, is what is the biggest competitor? Is it other soldiers to your promotion, or is it yourself?
It's yourself, mainly. Now, the thing with the Army is you have advantages being in different units than other units, though, because there's
It's
sometimes
easier for promotion, you mean?
no, not easier for promotion. So the thing is, you like when I worked at the hospital, I've worked at 2 Army hospitals, and when you're at the hospital, you have less opportunity to go to different training classes because the hospital never closes, and so the hospital mission is first. Like that hospital operating is the main priority.
Not your
The
promotion.
Yeah, I mean, so you have to take advantage of every opportunity there is for that. And then I mean, it looks good, like it gives you good experience
Mhm.
because you're always doing your job
Yeah.
when you're in the hospital. Like in field units, like I'm in now, which in the Army you have basically you have in the medical side of the Army you have like medcom, like the hospital side, and then you have forcecom. So forces command would be all your brigade combat teams, your big airborne divisions, all of that, and those are considered forces command. And forcecom, our priority is going and fighting wars, like that. It's not. So when you're in forcecom, the even the forcecom units, they really don't. I mean, they care when there's inspections or whatever, but
Mhm.
ultimately they don't care about the medical equipment. They care about trucks, guns, and they the medical is definitely not seen as a priority
Mhm. Mhm.
as much. At the hospital, that's all that matters, is patients. Um, but your priority in forcecom unit, I'm in a forcecom unit now, but I mean, we do our job every day.
So it's
We
preparing for war. It's not whether you're promotion or other aspects of the military. It's listen, this is I mean, that's why it's a very risky profession you're in, right? You're not a lifeguard at a swimming pool, even though it has its risks. You're training for war, right? And that can't be forgotten as well. Even when you're looking for promotions and all of that, like
Yeah.
the whole sole purpose is to train or to defend yourself. I guess you guys probably have a mission that is along those lines. So yeah.
and we have this thing called the medal, which is your mission essential task listing, um, and that's whatever unit you're in, they have a certain medal, and your commander is required for your unit to um, be trained to meet that. And so we go to the field about 5 times a year for a week to 2 weeks at a time. Basically, we just go out in the woods, and we live out in the woods for a week or 2 weeks, and we do our wartime mission somewhat, and it sucks, and it's not fun. but like we're going in just a couple of weeks and it's 100 degrees outside. So um it's
So you,
miserable.
so you, promotion, the most difficult thing is yourself, but also it's hard based on where you're placed at that particular time.
Yeah, and the opportunities there are. So there's other people that want to get promoted, trying to get into those same classes or that.
Only so many positions to be hired for. Yeah.
Yeah, and then once you get enough points, I mean, it depends. I know guys that I made sergeant in 5.5 years. I know guys that made sergeant in 2.5 years.
Mm.
It just depends, like, and that can be partially yourself, and it can also be partially the opportunities you were given. I had a soldier when I was at Fort Hood. He had been in for 7 years, and he had never been to training classes or anything. Like, whoever was in charge of him before failed him. Um, but that's also our job as a supervisor, is we are we have a responsibility to make sure our soldiers get those opportunities and that they get into those, because they can't do it themselves. And literally in the Army, we're responsible for those guys. Like, if they're late to work, we're held responsible too.
Mm-hmm.
And if they fail at something, it's our fault. Like, I know it's crazy, but like,
Yeah, it bleeds over into
yeah,
civil life too. It's
yeah.
something that, just one second. I'm gonna show my manly powers here. My dear wife asked me to. Oh, I just got denied. It's hot here. It's like 30 something degrees or 90 degrees. So my dear wife has asked me to open the spaghetti jar. Spaghetti jar. So thanks, honey. It was a little clammy. So what is with the difficulty in getting promotion? What is the greatest difficulty you experience in your career, whether it's particular to your job, your rank, or what is most difficult of being a soldier for you?
I think the most difficult part is difficult people. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so toxic leadership. Um, so I think the Army and the military is doing more about it now than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
But I've had some. I had one supervisor at Fort Hood. That guy was a tyrant. And the problem is that in the rank structure in the Army, is that it can get to the point where some people, they get enough rank that it protects them
Mm-hmm.
unless they do something really detrimental. Um, like, sometimes it has to get to the point where the way the system is sometimes set up is that unless the person sexually assaults someone or sexually harasses someone, they somehow
Get through.
get away with it. Yeah. And um, I mean, it's, the because as you get higher rank, you get more power, and it's and the problem is that you do still have those um soldiers that have been in the Army a really long time, and they got a lot of rank, and they still have that old school Army way of thinking, which in some ways is good,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because I think that in some of those ways, it's the the military is been negatively affected by this softer way of thinking in some ways. There's some benefits, and then there's definitely some um, repercussions that's being dealt with because of it. But you just, like, I know these days, people use that term snowflake, but the thing is, like, that you can't be that. Like, if you cannot, if you cannot handle the pressure, then the Army doesn't want you. But at the same time, people take it too far, and they some really bad things happen sometimes. Like people get left thinking, some crazy stuff happens, and people get in lots of trouble, and they do have things to deal with that, and to deal with the people like that. But yeah, toxic leadership, I think that's the hardest.
That's pretty universal, right? Like if you
Yeah.
have, whether it's a home in the family or business or this country or that country, if your leadership is waning or wanting, then that will trickle down to the employees or the subordinates. What is something you like about your job, Cliff?
I think I like the stability.
Yeah.
It's hard to lose your job in the Army.
Yeah.
But it does happen. I mean, you don't make it 13 years without, doing something right, obviously.
Yeah.
But obvious, and I like the structure. I love structure. Like, you can't call in sick in the Army.
What about you're
You
talking
don't-
about structure? How can you think back to when you were, whatever, 17, 18, and you were living how you wanted before you got married? Not, I would assume that there's not much structure in how you live, nor how I lived. And then you're married, and then now you have this career that's stable and structured. Can you see the contrast of how your thought process went then versus how you able to think now?
Oh, of course. I think the structure is, like, I have to be up at a certain time every morning. I have no other choice. I can't decide that I don't want to go to work today and call in sick. It holds, like, there's that consequences that the Army, if you're late to work, and especially if you do it enough, like, the Army will take pay away from you, and you can get punished with what we call Article 15, which is one of the articles in the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And so it's not just like, you may not, and eventually you can get kicked out of the Army. But it's, so, like, you, especially when you're a young soldier, you are scared to be late for work, or you, and it at the time seems like it's bad, but what you learn is you learn not to be late for work.
Why do you think, I mean, this is generally speaking, not all soldiers when they're first starting out are scared, but why do you think, and I think I have an idea, why do you think people would be scared just joining the military and worried about being late or sick or something? And what is the reasoning behind for their own personal fear of the consequences? What do you think that they may have lacked? But as what you're, I think, alluding to is what now you appreciate.
Oh, well, I think they lacked, I think what they have is laziness.
Yeah.
And everybody deals with that. Like, when you're a civilian and you, I mean, I've had plenty of civilian jobs, and you could get, there were consequences to being late. But you just didn't, like, the Army, like, especially basic training and stuff, like, they have drill sergeants that are there to put that healthy fear into you. And
that healthy fear of God.
I mean, and and the thing is, like, the Army doesn't always deal with things on paper. Like, what we try to do is deal with things so you don't have to pay actual financial consequences, like we call it getting smoked. But
to learn the lesson without being disciplined in your file.
Exactly. Yeah, it's called it's I know guys that have gotten they did physical training
I
getting
believe it.
yelled
I believe it.
all day long.
So yeah, I think you're touching on it, is that the people who would join the military are afraid because they lack that discipline going in, so they don't have the wherewithal to know that this is important. So out of fear, they're doing it rather than what you're saying now. You appreciate that structure. It is not. It's probably, it's not only your job now. You do everything in a structured order.
Oh, and it drives my wife nuts.
You should have said, but you said it was okay to join the military. You should have known I would be structured.
Yeah, you talk to my wife. It drives her nuts. Like how I just very meticulous.
Cliff, I know. We know.
And the thing is, like but the structure, like, keeps me organized. It keeps me from forgetting, and it keeps me accountable.
Yeah.
And it's and like now, I'm not responsible for myself. I'm responsible for myself and 4 other guys. And I'm the one, when those guys are late, can sometimes have to give them consequences, and I feel like their dad. And these are grown men, and because like in my squad, I don't have any females, but but I have to be an example to them. And it's and the thing is, like, it's the Army says for leaders to not let their subordinates know when they mess up. But I don't know. I always had more respect for a leader that understood they were
humility.
Exactly. And so I make sure I do the same. But it's the structure and the
stability.
And the thing is, like, I also, first and foremost, am responsible to take care of my wife and kids. And what I lack and what I neglect to do is going to affect them. And it's that's and even when I was in basic training, and I didn't know better. And and there were plenty of other people there with me that were making really stupid decisions that were, even at that time, getting them in trouble. I didn't even take the chance of doing anything like that, because I was like, this doesn't just affect me. It affects my wife at home, and my wife was pregnant with our son when I was in basic school. So, and another thing, what you were talking about, another thing that's hard is leaders that are over me that aren't married. That's hard.
They don't have the same understanding and appreciation for maybe your time.
Yeah, they're okay with staying at work all the time more. And
that would be tough.
They don't
and if you're not committed, like they're committed, then you're not committed.
Yeah,
I can see that happen.
And and then a lot of those guys, though, not all, but there's a pretty good percentage of those guys that have been married before and aren't married anymore. And they, and I don't think it justifies it, but because, my wife and I wouldn't do this, but they're at work all the time. Their family never sees them. And then sadly and unfortunately, their family leaves them. But and that's another thing is, like, my family, they know the Army doesn't come first, but that
That-
doesn't mean
That's what I
um
heard from a military family. That is it. The military is the first wife, and the wife is the mistress, or the mistress is the wife. Something along those lines.
well, so there's a saying in the Army, an old saying: if the Army wanted you to have a wife, they would have issued you one. And I say to that, well, I had my wife before I
Prior.
joined the Army.
You didn't have to. That's rough. That's
Yeah,
rough.
I know.
Or an opinion. If the army wanted you to have an opinion, they would have issued you one. That would work
Oh yeah,
too. Cliff,
yeah.
what is some advice that you have for, you think back to delivering your newspapers with your kid, with your parents, um, being a kid, and some of the jobs that you had, and looking into your hopes and dreams of being a mechanic, and that changing, and then finding a wife, and along that path, there were many types of you along the way that there are in the world now. People without direction, people who think they want to do something, not certain, in between jobs. What sort of advice do you have for people, in their way of work, in their life journey of work, and how they might be better served in thinking of work?
So I think that first, I think that you have to understand that, well, you got to have a purpose in it, right? So um, it's I think a lot of people's purpose can be different
Hmm.
for everybody. But I think the one thing is that you understand that you're like you don't want to be defined by your job, but um, it's but it and you want to find something that you enjoy to do. But if what you enjoy to do isn't going to financially support you, you might want to think of something else that you can do to um, for a job. There's a lot of people that in the Army, people do this too, and like they'll want to get out, and then you're like, hey, what are you going to do? And they don't know, or they're like, oh, I'm going to go to school, but yeah, how are you going to live?
Hmm.
Like, life is not like, things aren't free. Like, how are you going to live? And sometimes you just have to do those really crummy jobs
Hmm.
that are hard, that don't pay a lot, build skills.
Yeah.
Like, there, uh you have to have job skills. Like, the people, like, everybody thinks you got to go to college, but why is it that a lot of jobs where you go to some kind of vocational training pays much more a
Mm.
lot of times a job you could get from just going to college? It's because you can, because college, I'm not going to university is not a bad thing, and depending on your job it's going to require it. But the thing is that people complain about minimum wage being low, or, well, first of all, there's always got to be that minimal skills starting point for everyone.
Mhm.
And um and then if you don't like the job you're doing or the pay you get more skills. And a lot of people these days, they want to be popular online or on Instagram or YouTube, and they don't want to work. Not that some of
Mhm.
those people work,
Mhm.
but the thing is, like, that's a rarity. And just like professional sports players, it's rare. Like, this percentage of people that actually do some of those things is very, very rare. And not that, and some people just don't want to be normal. They don't want to have a normal job. They don't have to, but the thing is, like, people can say, you'll get people that don't get paid a lot, and they complain about their pay or that they live a certain way. And they say, but I work so hard. Yeah, but a lot of times the people that make a lot work way harder than you think they do, and
Mhm.
it they fought hard to get to where they are. And it's like, so when, and what we think is hard sometimes, and what hard is, like, to the I you could be a CEO of a big company, and they might be working 100 hours a week,
Mhm.
and but people complain about 40 hours a week, and I don't want to work 100 hours a week. But like, just the fact that um it's like, in the army is like, the more rank you get, a lot of times the more you're expected to work, and they're going to get that work out of you. But a lot of people, they don't want to do what it takes to what society deems as successful. Because society deems successful financially. You're at a certain point financially, um, but you've got to work hard, and you can't. You also can't just work hard, and you can't work hard at McDonald's, for instance, forever, and just stay at the bottom. Hey, if you want to become a manager, like, find out what skills you need to become a manager or to be in charge. And it's if you because you can't think the same way. And you also got to you can't always be a follower. I mean, to be a great leader, you got to be a good follower, but eventually like you got to start leading, because, like, if you want to make it higher in any job, you're going to have better skills. You're going to have to lead more than follow, and you're going to have to show whoever you work for that you're capable of doing that. And I mean, it's and the job market, I mean, jobs, it is very up to the people that you work with too. But you got to figure out, like, what do you have to do to impress that person who's in charge of you. And you can't just be like, well, I'm doing this. No, but what is their requirements? Because
Yeah, it's not.
unfortunately, that's it's they're the ones that's going to decide um, that or not, whether you progress or not, by what you show them. So it's now a lot of people don't want to do that, but and you know what? I mean, hey, if you're content with being at a certain point, whatever, go ahead. But
Mhm.
don't complain when you don't go further and you don't have more. And also, I think my other advice is that money's not everything, um, but it is important. And also, don't ever. I I just think that time you can't get back
Mm.
is never worth the sacrifice of your. And what I mean by that is, you get the people in the army, for instance, that they live at work basically, and they never see their family, and that's just time you can't get back. Like,
Mhm.
you need to figure out a way to get your job done in a timely manner, and where you don't have to be there forever,
Mhm.
because that time you can't get back.
Even if they don't have family, just to get back and take a rest and get out of it and push back from it for a bit.
Oh yeah, you gotta rest. But I think a lot of people want too much rest too. Like, a lot of people think they, like,
How
I
do
mean,
you rest? How do you rest, Cliff?
it's so funny. Like, so I'm pretty easygoing anyways. Like, I don't know. I feel like I'm a tortoise. Like I just take life slow. Like I'm not in a hurry about most anything. And it's funny because at night I always at some point like I just I fall asleep very fast when I go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And it's but the thing is like I just you just take those little moments of time to slow down and but not too much because
Do you
then you
still
just
do you still work on your car? Do you still
oh yeah
do that for break time, hobby time?
oh yeah I build custom bikes and stuff mainly now, um and I make money doing it too, on the side. But like I'm at a point right now where I'm just kind of probably a month or two rest time because I spent quite a bit of time building a bike for myself, and I finished about a month ago. And my wife and kids were like, "Man, now you can have a little bit of time with you, and you're not be in the garage every night."
Mm-hmm.
And then my wife's like, "You're kind of micromanaging things a little. I think we need to get you another project."
Get you back out of the house. Why don't you go ride that motorbike now?
But I I see how structure is good for everyone. And it's but I also see even with my own family and people that it's very hard for people to adjust to that. And it's not just structure, but like even in the army, like physically, like we have to do PT, physical training, every single day of the weekdays. And like like we take pretty good care of ourselves in our family, the way we eat and stuff. But like I mean I don't know, I probably run about 10 to 15 miles a week.
Mm-hmm.
um but it's not really by choice though. It's I mean you still have that, like you're required to do that, like you're not just it's not optional. And that's that structure there holds you accountable to do it. And but it's good for you, and I mean you benefit from it in more ways than one. But it's yeah, and you can't give up. Like you have to and you can't make excuses. You can't blame everybody else. It's not always somebody else's fault. um our laziness My laziness is
Mm-hmm.
my fault, nobody else's fault if I'm ever lazy. And it's I it's not like we have to have personal responsibility. And like I know my work ethic was terrible before I joined the army. That was my fault, nobody else's. And it's it but people have to understand you have to have personal responsibility. It's not always somebody else's fault, and you got to do something. And I mean laziness is it's a problem for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Like we all deal with that too. Like it's very tempting.
Mm-hmm.
uh, it's there's days I'm at work and I literally just I'm not motivated to do anything,
Yep.
but I still have
You're
to.
right. Yeah,
and
you're right.
and I got people that are expecting me to push them to do better. And more importantly, I got my wife and my kids that are expecting me to. And so it's and it affects every part of your life. um like our kids, I mean they have chores they got to do every day, and we hold them accountable. You'll do it every day.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't want to do it today,
Yep.
like you're gonna do it for longer. Like
Mm-hmm.
just because you just make more work for yourself when you procrastinate and you put things off. You make it harder for yourself and everybody else. So
No, you have really good advice, Cliff, because in all of that, those sorts of people, including you and I, is what you're saying. When we're
Oh yeah.
younger, we look at, the CEO or the basketball player or the YouTube channel person, like, oh, we want that life, but you're not looking at the 100 hours they're putting in or the skills required, or the jump shots. You just watch a Michael Jordan documentary or something, how many shots he had to take just to do that. And most people, you can't get them to run the 5 kilometer 5 miles in a week, let alone just shoot, 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 or whatever the sport may be, to do those things over and over and over and over again. And all of that does take discipline, and all of that does take not being the victim, not making excuses for yourself, and not blaming others for your shortcomings and trying to overcome them. Those are all great pieces of advice. Cliff, how can people get in touch with you if someone wants to get in touch with you about maybe joining the military, or just some things on cars? I know personally you love dealing with cars, and you're very talented at it, and maybe one day, maybe my dear wife will let you make me a bike or something. How could someone reach you?
So mainly, I'm on Facebook. Just look up Clifford Fortner. And I also have an Instagram. I don't use it very much.
Mm-hmm.
Just look up my name. I can't remember. That shows you how much I use it.
Mm-hmm.
But also, you could, yeah, I would say that's two ways. Also, I can get. I know Brian has my email. Um, so, but yeah, anybody can contact me.
I have one
Just
more question for you, Cliff. Is there
yeah.
anything else you'd like to add? Anything off the top of your head? Any regrets or hopes or wishes or advice for people before I have one more question for you?
Um, I think the biggest thing is you're just not to give up, and that, like, you want to have a purpose in life. Everybody wants to have a purpose, and my wife and I, as Christians, we understand our purpose in life. Um, and but the one thing is, um, that you just you yeah, I had this saying, we do better today than yesterday and better
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow than today. And it's but don't do it on your own. Like, you got to have people around you, um because you can have lots of money one day and be very successful and be all alone, and life would be very lonely. And it's don't forget about the people around you.
Yeah.
And so
It's true. I mean, with the idea of having a purpose, just, how I would solidify that is to say, make sure that purpose is sustainable on its own. If your purpose is the love of making motorbikes, well, what happens if something happened to your hands or something, and where you lose that ability, right? Or if the purpose is your dog, well, what happens when your dog goes away? Those things, as long as that thing is the motivation for the reasons why you do things is self-sustaining, um, then it will help sustain you in those difficult times, because it's something higher and stronger and better than what you're able to accomplish on your own. Cliff, I have one final question. Why do you work?
well, I first work because I got to support my wife and kids and take care of my family. That's my first priority. And second of all, I work because I love to lead people, and I and even as a soldier, I don't know, I love to be in charge and I love to lead people, but not to be a boss, but to
Mm-hmm.
be but to lead. Um, and I think also I work because I like it gives me, well, it's one of those. It's not the only thing, but it's one thing that gives me a purpose. And it's but I'm not defined by it.
Mhm.
Like that's not, like I don't want to be known, one day as, I want to be known as them knowing who I am, not where I worked and not what my
Mhm.
job necessarily was. And it's you gotta live, and especially depending on where you live, like, well, everywhere you live, it takes money. Um, but it does go beyond that. Um, that's what it starts out as. And don't get me wrong, I wouldn't be a soldier for free.
Mhm.
And um, I mean, it's it can be a hard life sometimes, and it's not, and I wouldn't do it for free. But as a soldier too, like I understand that I'm not just working, but I have a responsibility that, like, the United States of America is counting on military soldiers and military personnel to not just go and work every day, but like we have a bigger purpose than that. So
Well, Cliff, I appreciate your service in the military. I appreciate your love for your wife and your children and what you do. And I would like to talk to you again sometime about this very thing.
sounds
And
good.
take care and thank you very much.
Thank you.